My husband's boss asked to speak with me alone and locked the door behind him. I should have walked out, but instead, I listened. My name is Dana. I turned 44 last October, and the only person who remembered without a Facebook reminder was my daughter. My husband, Mitch, forgot. Again. It's not that he didn't care. At least, that's what I told myself. He works hard, too hard, if you ask me. VP of operations at a logistics firm that practically owns him. 12-hour days, 6 days a week. When he does come home, it's like he brings the spreadsheets and staff meetings with him. We've been married 19 years. That number used to sound like an accomplishment. Lately, it just feels like a countdown to something I'm too afraid to name. Our house is nice enough. A 2-story colonial in northern Indiana, on a quiet street where the mailman still waves. We have the kind of life that looks good in Christmas cards. But behind those photos is a woman who spends most dinners staring at a man who doesn't look up from his phone. I don't even know when the silence between us became normal, or when touching his shoulder in the kitchen started to feel like an intrusion. I used to paint. Watercolors, mostly. Landscapes. I haven't touched a brush in 4 years. Funny how a part of you can just dry up, and no one even notices. His name is Roman Carlyle. He owns the company Mitch works for. Technically, he's the CEO, but Mitch always calls him the man upstairs. Like some kind of distant god who occasionally appears in a suit that costs more than our mortgage payment. The first time I met Roman was at the company's holiday dinner. Black tie, crystal chandeliers. Too many forks on the table. I remember standing near the bar, waiting for Mitch to come back from taking a work call. Again. I was sipping white wine, chewing on the stem like it might make me invisible. That's when I felt someone watching me. You know the kind of gaze you feel before you see it? I turned, and there he was. Roman Carlyle doesn't look like a man in his 50s. He carries himself like someone who stopped counting birthdays and started collecting power instead. Dark hair, peppered at the temples. A jawline carved out of executive privilege. His eyes, gray like an overcast sky, stayed on mine longer than polite. He didn't smile right away. Just looked. Measured. And then he said, "You're not here for these people, are you?" It wasn't a question. It was a recognition. Like he'd seen the part of me that was barely holding together under mascara and a forced smile. I laughed too quickly. He didn't. He just leaned a little closer and said, "You hide it well." Then Mitch came back. Roman turned, greeted him with a firm handshake, and just like that, the moment vanished. But it stayed with me. Long after the dinner. Long after the wine. Long after I crawled into a cold bed beside a husband who still smelled like aftershave and strategy meetings. After that night, I found myself asking questions I never said out loud. Like why Roman had even noticed me. Or why his voice echoed in my head when I was folding laundry. Or why I suddenly cared so much about how I looked when I dropped off Mitch's lunch at the office. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That he was just being polite. Charismatic. Powerful men are always good at making people feel seen. That's how they stay powerful. Still, when Mitch mentioned Roman would be coming over for dinner to talk about the regional expansion, my stomach flipped in a way it hadn't in years. I wore a dress I hadn't worn since our 10th anniversary. One Mitch never commented on anymore. When Roman arrived, he brought a bottle of wine so expensive I couldn't even pronounce the label. He kissed my hand. Not in that performative, cheesy way, but like he meant it. Like it was a habit from another era he hadn't unlearned. He didn't flirt. Not overtly. But he watched. He listened. When I spoke, his eyes didn't drift to his phone. He asked questions. Follow-ups. The kind of attention that makes you feel remembered. When Mitch stepped out to take another call, always another call, Roman stayed at the kitchen island, swirling wine in his glass, watching me dry a dish. Then he said, almost idly, "You ever wonder what your life might have been if you'd made different choices?" I stopped drying. I didn't answer. He didn't press. A few weeks later, Mitch asked me to drop off some paperwork at the office. I wasn't busy. The house was quiet. I needed an excuse to wear makeup anyway. The receptionist told me Mitch had stepped out for lunch. Said Roman was in, though. I told her I'd wait. She waved me toward the executive wing. Roman's door was open. He was behind his desk, reading something. When he looked up, that same flicker crossed his face. Like I wasn't just a visitor, but a disruption. "Dana," he said, standing. "Now there's a surprise." I handed him the file. He didn't take it right away. He just looked at me for a beat too long. Then he said, "Come in." "Close the door." I hesitated. Just for a moment. But I stepped in. The door clicked shut behind me. He didn't sit. And neither did I. Roman walked slowly to the sideboard, poured 2 glasses of something amber and expensive, and held one out. I didn't take it. Not right away. "You ever wonder," he said again, "what it would feel like to be noticed? Not tolerated. Not taken for granted. Really seen." I took the glass. He watched me the way a man watches a flame, like it might warm him or burn him. "You deserve more than you're getting, Dana." My heart pounded. His voice dropped. And I don't just mean for Mitch. The air between us was heavy, charged. And then he stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, warm and smoky. Close enough that if I moved an inch forward, it would mean something we couldn't undo. He didn't touch me. He just looked at me like he wanted to. And waited. I said the one thing I shouldn't have. "Why me?" His answer? A whisper. "Because you're the kind of woman who waits for someone to ask the right question." The silence stretched. And in that moment, I almost answered it. But then, a knock at the door. Mitch's voice. "Hey, Roman? You in there?" Roman didn't flinch. He just turned his head, smiled at me, and said, "We'll talk soon." I stepped back. The spell broke. And the door unlocked. The next morning, I made Mitch his usual coffee. Extra cream, 2 sugars. Stirred clockwise because apparently counterclockwise tastes different. He didn't notice that I burned the toast. Or that I wore lipstick before 9 a.m. But I did. Roman's cologne still clung to my coat. Not strongly, just a trace. Like smoke on fabric. A scent that didn't belong in my kitchen. When I pulled the door shut behind Mitch, I leaned against it, eyes closed, trying to exhale it all out. But it stayed. In my pores. In my mouth. We hadn't done anything. No rules broken, no vows shattered. Just electricity. Words laced with meanings we never said out loud. But I knew the difference between safe and close. And we'd gotten too close. Over the next few weeks, Roman didn't call. But he didn't have to. Every time Mitch's phone lit up with a late-night message from RC, I felt my stomach twist, not with suspicion, but anticipation. And shame. It wasn't just about Roman. It was what I became when I was around him. Sharper. Awake. Like I'd been living with the volume turned down, and he was the one who finally turned the dial back up. One Thursday afternoon, Roman sent a text. "Passing by your street. I won't knock. Just thought you should know I'm thinking about you." I stared at the message so long the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. Not then. The next day, I was in the garage when I saw his car idle at the corner. Black. Polished. Out of place next to the pickup trucks and SUVs of my neighborhood. He didn't get out. Didn't wave. Just waited. And I walked out to meet him. I didn't even bring a jacket. I slid into the passenger seat. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Then he whispered, "You came." I looked straight ahead. I shouldn't have. But I stayed. We drove. Not far. Just out past the lake, to a small overlook where no one goes in March. Gray sky, bare trees, cold air pressing against the windows. Still, we didn't touch. We didn't have to. His voice was quiet. "You don't have to explain. I see it, Dana. All of it. You've been holding your breath for years." I didn't cry. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the first time someone told me what I already knew and didn't flinch. I looked at him. And he looked at me like a woman, not a job title's wife. He reached for my hand. I let him. It wasn't a kiss. Or a confession. Or a betrayal anyone could see. But we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. When I got home, Mitch was in the garage, wiping down golf clubs he hadn't used in a year. He didn't ask where I'd been. He didn't look up. and I realized he hadn't noticed I was gone. I thought I was careful. I deleted the text threads. I never called Roman. I never said anything. But guilt has a scent, a rhythm, a way of settling into your skin. One night, I found Mitch sitting in the living room, staring at his laptop with a blank look. "Everything okay?" I asked. He didn't answer, just turned the screen toward me. Security footage. From his office building. Roman's office. The footage showed me. Walking in. The door closing. Then nothing. Just the locked door. 10 minutes of silence. Then me again. Leaving. Blushing. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mitch's voice was low. He installed cameras last quarter. Said we needed tighter security after the break-ins. I didn't know what to say. There was no lie that could fix that footage. But Mitch didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just sat there, motionless. And then he asked, "Did you sleep with him?" I shook my head. "No, I didn't." He looked at me. Really looked. "But you wanted to." I didn't answer. He closed the laptop. "You know what hurts the most?" he said, barely above a whisper. "Not that you were with him. That you weren't with me. For years." Then he stood. Walked past me. Out the door. And didn't come back that night. Or the next. 3 days later, I found the ring. On the kitchen counter. Right where I used to leave the mail he never read. He hadn't said a word since he left. No texts. No calls. Just the ring. No note. But something told me I didn't need one. I looked at the empty band. Thought about the woman I used to be. The man who noticed. The husband who didn't. And the choice I never really made, but made all the same. I took off my apron. Took one last look at the quiet house. The spotless floors. The framed smiles. And I walked out the front door without looking back. He left the ring. I left everything else.